Nearly 2,000 years ago, the elite 9th Legion vanished somewhere on Britain's remote frontier. The legend of the 9th Legion is one of history's most puzzling mysteries. And the feature film, The Eagle, has sparked investigation into what really happened.
Ready? On my command!
How could 5,000 highly trained troops just vanish into thin air?
What happened to the 9th? Is it possible that it disappeared up north?
Could the biggest Roman monument in Britain hold a clue?
It's one of those has intrigued me over time and has really drawn me in.
We know for certain the 9th Legion vanished from historical records in around AD 117. The story of its disappearance was modern times by Rosemary Sutcliffe's classic 1954 novel, The Eagle of the 9th, and that the feature film The Eagle is based.
Our new commander, Marcus Aquila.
4th Cohort of Gauls, 2nd Legion.
Follows fictional Roman officer Marcus Aquila, who goes north in search of his father's missing legion, a priceless symbol of honor and valor, their lost eagle standard. Her celebrated book has sold over 1 million copies, but where did Rosemary Sutcliffe get the inspiration for her story?
When she was very young, she had still spent many years in and out of hospital as a youngster, in the 20s. Many years as a young left on her own, lying in bed in hospital or in her own bedroom at home, however loving her wonderful parents were, I suspect was a great spur to her, and she invented whole worlds for herself, I suspect. Came from. She was meticulous about her research. She also had a network of informants. She'd have an archaeologist here and an expert in Roman military so she evolved what we'd now call a network, but she had a whole range of people she'd talk to and ask, point her in the right direction.
In the introduction to the book, Rosemary Sutcliffe explains where she got the inspiration for the story. There was dug up under the green fields which now cover the pavements of Calatum, a wingless Roman eagle. Different people have different ideas as to how it came. But no one knows, just as no one knows, what happened after it marched into the northern mists. Rosemary Sutcliffe had woven a fictional story out of the known disappearance of the 9th Legion, discovery of a Roman eagle. But Dr. Miles Russell has been re-examining the mystery of the 9th Legion.
The story of the 9th Legion is one of those really motive stories that really captures the public imagination. But it's also one of those stories which, as said, there is nothing to say. There is no story. The 9th didn't disappear in Britain. It wasn't annihilated. It was simply transferred somewhere else. So the conflict between what we get in the public imagination and the academic story.
We know for certain that the 9th's last recorded posting was in Britain. Is it possible that a Roman eagle found in 1866, the one Rosemary Sutcliffe refers to in her introduction, could offer clues to help history?
This is Silchester. This is the Roman town of Caliva Atrebatum, and it's very difficult when you're looking out across these open fields now. This was one of the busiest and most thriving towns in Roman Britain. All the houses and shops and everything just left with open fields. But to some extent, that's been a boon for archaeologists, because over the last 300 years or so, many antiquarians are digging here trying to find the complete plan of the town. And it was just behind me over there in the near distance. The Reverend Joyce in 1866, while his team were excavating in the southern end of the Basilica, which is the major market part of the town, found the and to him the only thing it could be was the standard of a legion, and the only legion that's in Britain at that time was the 9th. So he was very keen to put those two facts together, and of course it was Rosemary Sutcliffe who made it more consumable, I suppose, made it more palatable for the public, and created the hero Aquila, whose father is in the 9th Legion, who heads north to try and find out what happened to his father, what happened to the eagle, and to try and return that to his people.
To kill! He came to punish us because we would not bow to the name of Rome.
The eagle was discovered by the Reverend James Joyce and his small team under the floor of the ruined Roman basilica. The Reverend Joyce was an exceptionally talented antiquarian, and his incredible discovery was the only Roman eagle ever found in Britain.
We're here at Reading Museum to see the Silchester eagle, because that's where the whole sort of modern story, Eagle of the Night, began. This is the object that Rosemary Sutcliffe based her story upon. So I've never actually, I got an opportunity to look at it and to understand whether or not it could be a military standard.
Hello, Miles.
Hello.
Museum.
Thank you.
Come on through to the Silchester Gallery. Here's the beautiful creature you've come to see.
Fantastic. That's amazing.
Isn't he gorgeous?
He's absolutely beautiful.
He's had a bit of a rough life, this poor eagle. He started off with one set of wings, and he lost his wings at some stage. He lost his legs and feet. And then later he was repaired, and that's why you've got this rather ugly cut in the back, because that's where the new pair of wings was fitted on, and a new pair of legs was slotted into the body. And the curve of the feet, where the feet were like that, and they were gripping a globe. So what you've got is a symbol of power on a globe, held in the hands of either an emperor or a god, who was also a powerful person. So you've got a symbol of power held in the hands of the person who held the power.
I suppose, given what you're saying, but he seems to be standing on a globe, the $6 million question is he a military standard? Has he got anything to do with the military at all?
I'm afraid not. I hate debunking the myth, and I did think the Eagle of the Night would be a fantastic book, but he is a civil eagle, and he is a symbol of civil power, if you like, civil regalia. He would have been there as a symbol of the might of the town.
As a symbol for the Roman state, he's certainly without compare.
Absolutely, and Joyce, who found him, regarded him prize.
I can see why. I mean, he's such a... I love that face. It's such an arrogant expression.
He's got his secrets, and he's going to keep them.
Reverend Joyce realised the significance of his find, but why was the symbol of the eagle so important?
Rome was a deeply, deeply religious society. The supreme god was Jupiter. Jupiter is traditionally as an eagle, and the loss of it is felt as a psychological shock.
Whether a part of civic regalia or of a military standard, the eagle was a vital part of Rome. But does the Silchester eagle get us any closer to the mystery of the 9th Legion?
I think the trouble with the eagle as found at Silchester was that if you found it in any other context, if you'd found it in Northern Scotland, then most people would agree it's a military standard, it's something that's been lost in pain, or it's been taken as a trophy. So we don't really know where it has come from. We know it's ended up in Silchester, but we don't know where it originally... So although we can never prove it was a military standard, there's still the tantalising possibility.
To find out what happened to the 9th Legion, you have to understand Roman military. The investigation had to establish where, why, and how defeated, and who was responsible. Legend tells us that the 9th Legion disappeared fighting hostile deep in Scotland. The famous story retold in the film The Eagle has tantalised generations, defeated experts for over 50 years.
Who has the eagle?
He knows.
So what do we at the 9th Legion?
We have very, very little hard information. Historical sources and bits and pieces of archaeological evidence that form bits of a jigsaw puzzle where most of the pieces are missing.
From the 80s, historians have tried to say, well, what happened? Was it destroyed in Britain? Is there some great cataclysmic event that would have wiped them off the face of the earth?
They weren't invincible, and that's the mystery here. That's the reason we like to follow this story so closely.
Is there or historical evidence to show where exactly the 9th Legion disappeared?
There are references to the 9th from 65 BC until 8. But suddenly after that date, all references cease. Oh, the Legion disappeared from the historical record. This is the source of the legend.
Now, trying to reconstruct what actually happened to it is then a matter of piecing together occasional historical sources to fighting in different parts of the empire, occasional bits of inscriptional evidence, and occasional archaeological evidence, and trying to make sense of the pattern that form. And you've got to then try and come to some kind of conclusion about where is the most likely place for this legion to have kind of military disaster which would effectively destroy it and remove it from the list.
The 9th Legion arrived in Britain in AD 43, where they played a pivotal role in the invasion of southern Britain.
At the time, they are one of the premier units, and Britain is the sort of proving ground for units. It's one of the hardest fought provinces of the empire. It's never totally pacified. If you want to make something of yourself as an officer, then it's to Britain that you need to go. It's one of those sort of great sort of areas which is almost constantly in conflict, and the 9th are part of that.
The 9th Legion was one of Rome's crack units because initially in AD 43 they sent 4 top legions in army, and the 9th was one of them. And the 9th played a central role in the conquest of Roman Britain. The early phases of the Roman relatively easy. It was a kind of Roman blitzkrieg. And then most of the southeastern part of the country seems to have been overrun within 2 of the initial invasion. So that was an easy conquest and probably anticipated as such by the Romans.
I think it was quite a surprise once we moved out of lowland Britain. All their tactical information related to the landscape of the southeast. They probably knew very little about what lay beyond, other than that's where your gold and silver and your mineral reserves are. So once they moved sort of landscape here, they sort of are moving into a more mountainous terrain. They encounter, given their experience in the south and east, it would have been a bit of a shock, a bit of a surprise. The landscape and the people were both against them.
The 9th was the toughest and most experienced entire Roman Empire. Raised in Spain in 65 BC as the 9th Hispana, later led it to victory after victory. The 9th Hispana was one of totaling 50,000 men, which spearheaded the conquest of Britain and brought the southern tribes to their knees. Then was made up of over 5,000 elite heavy infantry soldiers, supported by several thousand auxiliary troops. Rule of Emperor Claudius, the Roman legions in Britain unleashed the shock and awe of their military and quickly conquered southern England to establish the new province of Britannia.
The big question was, once they got stopped, do we want to take on the entire island of 90,000 square miles, or do we just want to hang on down in the bottom? And that's the dichotomy. Where shall the conquest stop?
It may well have been the case that the original plan was not to conquer the north, and you conquer the southeast because it's relatively open country, it's relatively rich, it's a tax revenue, it's fairly easy to control, and maybe initially they didn't want to move into the north and the west.
The new province of Britannia stretched from Exeter in the south right to northeast. It was here, from its legionary base in Lincoln, that the 9th Legion was charged with holding the frontier.
The initial invasion actually proceeded quite easily, and of course, as the geography gets more challenging as well. Wales was fairly kind of mountainous, difficult campaigning. Same is true as you go further north. So they sort of went over the lowlands quite easily. You've got to, once you start creating the province and you've got a frontier to protect, then you're going to do this. So the further they extended, the more difficult the campaigns became.
Hostile tribes in the unconquered areas challenged Roman supremacy. Fierce insurgents used to submit to Roman rule. The 9th and Rome's other legions were faced with a slow, messy guerrilla war.
Roman troops move into Wales, and of course they want to move into Wales because it's rich in gold. So, we speak in metalwork, that's the kind of areas they want to get into to extract tin, gold, and make Britain profitable. But it's exactly the same kind of landscape Rome is not good at fighting in. It's mountainous, it's very sort of hard rock geology, you've got very dispersions.
To protect its newly conquered territory in the south, Rome had to establish an alliance with the largest and full tribe in Britain, the Brigantes. This provided a buffer zone, a pup protecting Rome's interests while it settled matters in Wales.
Well-established Roman practice of creating what we sometimes call client kingdoms, where the small kingdom, the Roman frontier, is ruled by somebody who is pro-Roman, who is sympathetic to the Romans, who is subsidised by the Romans, who is essentially doing the Romans' bidding and can be trusted to control their own and to act as a kind of buffer against unconquered tribes beyond.
However, Rome's political strategy outside the southern heartland failed to capture hearts and minds and started to unravel. This had serious consequences for the 9th Legion.
In southern England, those tribes wanted to be Roman, and their people and their leaders were copying Roman life, building more sort of Roman structures. In the north, in northern England, that isn't happening at all. So if you want to assimilate those people, you've got to change their mindset. You've got to make them want to be Roman. And I think that's the big difficulty for Rome. It never quite. Northern England is always a frontier province. It's always militarised. And the local population see the incentive to become Roman.
While 2 legions were busy campaigning in Wales, the Celtic leader of the Iceni tribe, together with her tribal allies, revolted against Roman greed and marched on Roman cities in southern Britain. The 9th Legion was dispatched from its legionary fortress in Lincoln to intercept tribes in the early stages of the rebellion.
The 9th Legion, of course, is proactive. It immediately gets out there with whatever they've got, nip the rebellion in the bud. So in other words, lash out immediately.
But rebellion erupted into full-scale war. The 9th Legion was heavily outnumbered by Boudicca's forces, severely mauled, losing thousands of troops. 80,000 civilians were butchered by Boudicca's vicious insurrection in destruction of Colchester, St Albans and London. Rome was on. The province hung by a thread. How could this seemingly invincible force be beaten by primitive tribes?
We have the greatest army the world probably has ever seen, in fact, superbly equipped, well-paid, led, up against really insurgents who have nothing. And it's quite an interesting idea to see how they could have done it, how the Roman army would have slid.
Boudicca almost destroyed the 9th Legion and had dealt out the Romans. But Roman discipline prevailed and the rebellion was crushed. Now British tribes witnessed the Roman revenge. The remaining legions, together with survivors of the 9th, destroyed Boudicca's tribe.
It's communicating a message. It's saying the price of resistance, the price of opposing Rome, is this kind of devastation.
The 9th Legion's fighting strength was eventual, yet they would be forced into more confrontations with an enemy that hated everything the Empire stood for. Far worse was yet to come. As depicted in Rosemary Sutcliffe's and the feature film The Eagle, the answer to the mystery of the disappearance of the 9th Legion lies in the lands of northern Britain. After the disaster of Boudicca's rebellion, the Roman master plan for Britain was left.
Did the Romans really have a master plan? I think probably not. I think the initial plan was to conquer southern Britain, the rich. To go much further than that, I don't think they really thought it out.
In AD 57, the client kingdom of Brigantia, Rome's puppet state, became unstable. The protected by the Brigantes tribe had started to disintegrate.
The problem with puppet client kingdoms is that you tend to get an internal, nationalist, as it were, opposition to a government which is seen as king with the imperial superpower. And that kind of tension is there, right? The tribal kingdom of Brigantia.
North Britain didn't have many attractions, I don't think, for them, particularly commercially, or at least what could they steal, it pay. It must have come as a terrible shock to them to find there was no gold in the Pennines and none in the, all the rest of it. But, and we do know that they do tend to whinge rather about the climate and the boggy ground and the fact that it was so poor, that they wanted to really avoid contact with that, but for strategic reasons, to defend what they... Eventually, of course, they are forced to go north.
Troops from the 9th Legion went in had reinstated the pro-Roman leader of the brigade, Queen Cartimandua. It was a bad omen. In AD, the Brigantian problem returned. Civil war ignited and anti-Roman rebels attacked Queen Cartimandua's royal capital in Yorkshire. Had to take action.
Brigantia becomes ruled by an anti-Roman nationalist regime. Then the Romans decide they've got no alternative but to go in and establish, because otherwise they've got the problem that there's a hostile power on the border, rich heartlands of the new province of Britannia that they're building in the south.
You say the eagle's been seen in the far north.
Just as the fictional Marcus Aquila's search for the 9th Legion's missing eagle took him north, our investigation will take us in the same direction. Clues to the mystery of the 9th started to emerge from its legionary fortress.
The fortress of York, established in AD 71, is the headquarters of the 9th Legion, sent deep into territory, and it represents a real failure of Roman policy of appeasement of the Brigantes. So York represents the hub of the policing activity, but the real action's occurring deep into native territory, especially around this resistance, the centre of the British insurgency, a large site called Stannick.
For a second time, assault troops from the 9th Legion were dispatched to rescue Queen Cartimandua, trapped at her palace at Stannick in...
This is the major centre of the political heart of the Brigantes. This would have been the key target when into this area. So this should have been attacked. And indeed, excavations here in the 1950s of burning, which they assumed was part of that attack. So if that is the case, we can imagine legionaries trying to storm up these particular ramparts above their heads. The defenders putting in a particularly fierce resistance, trying to keep them away. Got in, they take no prisoners, no mercy, completely eradicate the site, destroy it, and plough it over. And that's probably what has happened here.
The conflict forced Rome to kickstart a fresh surge north to tackle the British problem once and for all. The total conquest of Britain was now on the agenda. Two massive columns, the 9th and 20th Legions, bulldozed tribes in lowland Scotland and pushed north to subdue the Highland tribes, but it very nearly ended in disaster. For the second time in its history, the unlucky 9th Legion was almost wiped out in the Macedonian warriors. But the attack was repelled by Roman reinforcements just in the nick of time.
This is of tough fighters, but tough fighters who've suffered reverses in the campaigning in Britain. I'm sure the ancient mind would have seen it in this way. Possibly these were portents of something terrible that was going to happen to the Legion in the far north.
The following massive Roman offensive made 30,000 Caledonians in fight. The legions killed 10,000 enemy hostiles at the infamous Battle of Mons Graupius in AD 83 with minimal Roman. The secret of Roman military success was down to superior training and tactics. Machine failed to deliver a decisive victory at Mons Graupius in AD 83. 20,000 warriors escaped and vanished into the glens and forests. The tribes had learned an important lesson. In a pitch, the 9th Legion was invincible. They would have to come up with a new way of combating the Roman. Rome's decision to pacify and take over the whole country came at a price.
As the Romans push forward, trying to control this very rugged, difficult, mountainous wilderness, so you need a heavier investment of roads, forts and soldiers, not just to conquer it, but then to control it.
One such fortified military road, which ran for over 40 miles from Carlisle in the west to Corbridge in the east. Following the battle at Mons Graupius, the 9th Legion retreated to the Staingate Road to protect the frontier.
There are a number of forts spaced along there, it's at 7 or 8 mile intervals, whatever, probably communicating with each other by signal towers or whatever. But really, it's just sit and wait thing. We've got the best bit of Britain. Are we going to be ordered? Let's just sit and see what happens.
The 9th Legion now controlled the north. Operating from its command centre in York, this was the last known posting of the before it disappeared.
Andrew, hello.
Hi, Miles. Welcome to the Yorkshire Museum.
I think you've got some interesting evidence of the 9th Legion to show me.
We certainly do, just over here.
Ah, fantastic. Oh, wow, it's quite an impressive slab of masonry.
It is. It's metres high up on our wall, and it's probably one of the finest pieces of imperial letter cutting in England.
And that's actually specific to the 9th, is it? This is actually found in York?
Absolutely. It's found in King's Square, which is just outside of the museum. And if you look at the last line, it says V-I-I-I-I. It's a bit of a mouthful, rather than perhaps what you normally see, which is I-X, but that is the 9th Legion.
So can we actually tie that down to a particular date?
Absolutely. If you look just above that, it says Tribunica Artis and then XII. It's the 12th time that Trajan, the emperor, who's formerly recorded lines, is declared tribune of the people. It gives us a very specific date of around 107, 108 AD.
Excellent. So have we got any other evidence for the 9th?
Not really at all. This actually is the last datable evidence of that legion existing.
From its command centre in York, the 9th Legion policed the frontier military zone and movements over a vast tribal territory. The 9ths are quickly deployed in the event of an attack from the tribes north of the frontier. But for now, they are just playing a waiting game.
It looks as if they're on the defensive. They've actually stopped going forward, and one of the things the Legion is good at doing is, in fact, going forward. It's not particularly well designed for standing around doing nothing. It wants to get at the jugular of somebody. Very frustrating.
By about AD 100, Roman folk attacked the Staingate defensive road and drove a wedge between tribal communities either side of the frontier.
Foreign, bullying soldiers demanding to know where you're going and who is it you're going to see and what's in your cart. And no, I don't think we're going to let you go through. And you can see how easily that tension could build up and reach an explosion point.
At the Great North Museum in Newcastle, experts have been studying the vast quantity of archaeological material that has been discovered in this military zone. The signs are that Rome's relationship with the northern tribe of constant conflict.
The Romans had this idea that if you were from within the Roman Empire, not necessarily from Italy or Rome itself, but if you came from Empire, you were one of us. If you came from outside the Roman Empire, you were not one of us, or had to be treated as a barbarian.
Film. The main characters, Marcus and Esca, are captured by a hostile barbarian tribe, the Romans. True to life, this hatred sparked rebellion early in the new Emperor Hadrian's reign.
Now, if you do face revolt, what you're almost certainly going to have to do is to call on your strategic reserves from further south, and a field army will come up to deal, possibly mounting a punitive expedition where you go in and you impose fire and sword, which means you kill all living things you come across and you burn that you can, and you basically communicate the message: this is the price you pay for resisting the Roman Empire.
Archaeologists have found a large number of Roman funeral monuments, chivalry killing British insurgents. Roman historians revealed that early in Emperor Hadrian's reign, what great numbers of soldiers were killed by the Jews, what great numbers by the British. Serious legionary casualties. So did the 9th re-enter the battlefield? Could an invincible killing machine like the 9th succumb to primitive of the Empire? Could our investigation finally solve the mystery? What happened to the 9th Legion? The feature film The Eagle has interest in the mystery of Rome's lost 9th Legion. To find out what happened to the Legion, experts focused on the military situation in northern Britain.
All the archaeological evidence, all the historic evidence says that the 9th Legion, it disappeared, and it...
At the Roman fort of Vindolanda near Hexham in Northumberland, archaeologists have unearthed vital evidence that proves the Romans were locked in lethal combat with tribes at the frontier.
Ancient warfare is incredibly brutal. In fact, we've actually got probably a dead enemy combatant was left in a fort ditch after being mounted as a trophy on the ramparts of one of the forts, sending a clear message out: don't mess with the Roman army, don't muck with the soldiers here, or this will happen to you. And here we have the skull of a young man who was killed in combat, and we've got very severe injuries to the skull here. We've got the side of his skull which has been bashed in or sliced, bone missing here by a very sharp implement, and on the other side, or perhaps a pommel of a sword has bashed in the other side of his skull.
From sites like Vindolanda, the Ninth Host watched and gathered intelligence on their enemies, using specialist cavalry soldier exploratories. One of the famous Vindolanda tablets reports that the wretched Britons had many cavalry. It seems the Romans were concerned with good reason, as depicted in the film. One of the most compelling clues for what happened to the unique discovery, the tombstone of a centurion by the name of Titus Annius, stationed at Vindolanda. The tombstone is in command of a unit serving alongside the 9th Legion, and he died in a war against. Further evidence from Roman geological finds indicate that reinforcements from elsewhere in the empire were drafted in on a British to fight a major war at the beginning of Hadrian's reign around AD 117, not long after the 9th seems to have vanished.
There's an inscription in Italy that says that 3 Roman soldiers were sent to Britain from Germany and Spain. Another fragment we've got is the knowledge we have. Hadrian, when he pitches up in Britain in 121 or 122, he brings with him the 6th Legion, and the 6th Legion is then stationed in Britain. Now, those 2 bits of evidence put together strongly, there have been serious legionary losses in Britain that are having to be made. And this, of course, is at the time when the 9th Legion seems to disappear.
Again, one would think, well, why is he bringing a new legion? Is the situation so serious, establishment has to be raised, or is it to make up for previous losses? I think it's more like the previous losses. So we're looking at the Roman army in that period losing perhaps 9,000 or 10,000 men, and these being replaced by a new legion of 5 plus a further 3,000.
It is without doubt that the signal at the beginning of Hadrian's reign, serious enough in fact for the new emperor to have to come in person to the frontier.
This place the Emperor Hadrian wanted to be was in the rain and the fog swamps of North Britain. We have to assume that if the emperor is deciding to visit this godforsaken part of the, it's because he needs to be there, because there's some kind of military emergency which he has to address.
By the time Hadrian arrived at the northern frontier, the 9th had already disappeared. This elite legion fall prey to lesser-equipped tribal insurgents.
The Roman army was a high-tech army. It was an army which depended on armour, on supplies, on plenty of equipment. It was extremely powerful in open-pitched battle. What was more difficult for the Roman army was asymmetric warfare, where the Romans are facing dispersed guerrillas who are fighting as skirmishers, who are ambushing, are lightly equipped so they can scatter when the Romans try and organise a charge, can maintain that kind of skirmishing battle, perhaps running over hours and perhaps running over days, and gradually wearing powerful Roman force that can never really properly get to grips with them, especially if the action takes place in difficult terrain, in hilly terrain or swampy terrain or wooded terrain.
You have a great lion, like a giant elephant, trying to chase ants across the battlefield. It just cannot get hold of them. Remember the ground like the back of their hands. They know everywhere to hide. Their skills are probably much greater at yours at using the terrain. And so you are exhausting round after the man.
I think, Mark, this is exactly the sort of terrain where one can imagine this kind of place where it's a kind of wilderness. The Roman army has been lured into it by the guerrillas. They're quite deliberately luring them to a place like this where the column is strung out. And then on all sides, they'd be able to attack at different points in the line, and it would be chaos, wouldn't it?
Yes, we've got to remember, you see, that the Romans are going to be sprung out for at least a mile, maybe a mile and a half back here. Who's ever in command of this can only really command seas.
Yeah.
So he's going to try getting messages back and forth is absolutely impossible. From the enemy, what to do is look at this long sausage and just slice it precisely where they want to, cut it off, isolate it from the rest of it, and frankly, it's an absolutely impossible city. You'll be worn down fairly quickly and piecemeal sliced up, assuming that there are enough numbers against you. But it's a command nightmare.
And these guys don't have to do it quickly, do they?
No.
Because, I mean, if the Romans concert a charge, they can just scarper, yeah, and then come back.
Exactly. So you're just fighting shadows and you're just exhausting yourself.
Yeah.
You can't get all your equipment and everybody in the right line. People are scattered everywhere. It's a nightmare, really.
This wasn't the Romans had been beaten this way. The disastrous Battle of Teutoburg Forest against German tribes demonstrated just how vulnerable legions were, where they could be ambushed.
There's a message. The Romans can be taken on, they can be beaten, and if you beat them, drive them out for good. It's perfectly possible that people in the north of Britain, a century later, knew about that historical experience.
The 9th could have been drawn into exactly the same nightmare scenario, but likely location. Possibly the best clue is to be found at the impressive monumental frontier in the entire Roman Empire, Hadrian's Wall.
It's a divide between Romans and barbarians. Onwards, everything to the south is militarised or civilian, but it's Roman. In a way, it's a statement of defeat, saying that Rome aren't going to go any further north.
Work on the wall AD 122, after the 9th vanished. It perfectly illustrates the classic Roman method of divide and rule. Split up, prevent them causing further damage to the empire and its forces.
Very likely that the tribes in the north, if they were going to rise in revolt, would at least have attempted to bring in up to form some kind of confederation. So it could be that what the Romans were facing early in the 2nd century AD was a rising of pretty well the whole of the north of Britain.
The loss of the 9th may have led them to realise that the total conquest of Britain was unachievable and the dividing wall needed to be built. Recently, an amazing discovery has come to light. Archaeologists have found key evidence that Romans were in constant fear of surprise attacks during construction.
Hey Jeff, can you tell me what's been recovered here archaeologically?
Well, this area here, between the wall, known as the berm, and in Tyneside, they found a series of pits or post holes in 3 lines occupying this space here. Generally felt, but certainly by the excavators, that what they'd found were entanglements or obstacles to people attacking the wall.
But I gather you got an alternative interpretation as to their function.
Yes, I consider that these 3 lines of post holes running up the berm here of a timber wall. A timber rampart, as the Romans like to build, is a sort of temporary that they put up, so they got protection for the 6 years it's going to take to build the wall.
Battle sites are notoriously difficult, but clues at the western end of Hadrian's Wall near Carlisle showed a concentration of defensive on Stanix. This was the wall's command centre and the base of Rome's infamous Ala Petriana, 1,000-strong cavalry unit always positioned near the area of greatest threat. Maybe this was where the 9th met its end, in the most dangerous zone of the entire frontier. Hadrian's Wall provides powerful signs as to the fate of. The wall was built because Rome could no longer tame Britain's barbarian tribes. The mystery of the 9th, because Hadrian and his spin doctors would want to keep it secret that one of their finest legions had.
If North Britain had erupted right at the beginning of Hadrian's reign and there was an emergency which required the emperor in person to take charge of matters, they wouldn't have wanted to broadcast that military insecurity across the empire, lest it encouraged others.
Talking about a conspiracy of silence, that a legion, if it has disgraced itself, wouldn't be discussed. There would be an attempt to eradicate it. You could argue that the absence of evidence that we got for the loss of the 9th is because they be a way that the Roman state wanted to forget they'd ever existed.
The signs are that the 9th Legion was destroyed by insurgent forces in the far north, and that Rosemary Sutcliffe's novel, The Eagle of the 9th, was not.
My guess would be that the 9th Legion was destroyed in North Britain, probably in what is now southern Scotland, in some kind of carefully executed military by a confederation of northern tribes.
History is always kind of a first draft, and we're constantly revising it, we're constantly sort of discovering new information, we're constantly finding better ways of explaining the place in the past.
What I really think about the 9th, given all the evidence available to us, is that they were annihilated within Britain. There may have been pockets of troops still alive, still survived, but not enough to reinforce. They need to be completely ripped. So a scenario for the disappearance of the 9th is in northern England, somewhere between York and Hadrian. Large numbers of Roman troops die.
If we're very, very lucky, one day at a place like Vindolanda, we may find a document, a letter, anything which will actually give us the hard information we need about exactly what happened with the mystery of the 9th.
But until then, all the evidence points towards a Roman military design and the loss of a formidable fighting force. Rome's lost legion, the 9th.